halls in Vinyamar beside the sea. And there Ulmo came to him once again and spoke with him. And he said, Now thou shalt go at last to Gondolin, Turgon, and I will maintain my power in the vale of Sirion, and in all the waters therein, so that none shall mark thy going, nor shall any find there the hidden entrance against thy will. Longest of all the realms of the Eldalir shall Gondolin stand against Melkor. But love not too well the work of thy hands, and the devices of thy heart, and remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west, and cometh from the sea. And Ulmo warned Turgon that he also lay under the doom of Mandos, which Ulmo had no power to remove. Thus it may come to pass, he said, that the curse of the Noldor shall find thee too ere the end, and treason awake within thy walls. Then they shall be in peril of fire. But if this peril draweth nigh indeed, then even from Nevrast one shall come to warn thee, and from him beyond ruin and fire hope shall be born for elves and men. Leave therefore in this house arms and a sword, that in years to come he may find them, and thus shalt thou know him, and not be deceived. And Ulmo declared to Turgon of what kind and stature should be the helm, and mail, and sword that he left behind. Then Ulmo returned to the sea, and Turgon sent forth all his people, even to a third part of the Noldor, of Fingolfin's following, and a yet greater host of the Sindar. And they passed away, company by company, secretly, under the shadows of Ered Wethrin, and they came unseen to Gondolin, and none knew whither they had gone. And last of all, Turgon arose, and went with his household silently through the hills, and past the gates in the mountains, and they were shut behind him. Through many long years none passed inward thereafter, save Húrin and Huor only. And the host of Turgon came never forth again until the year of lamentation, after 350 years and more. But behind the circle of the mountains the people of Turgon grew and throve, and they put forth their skill in labour unceasing, so that Gondolin upon Amon Gwareth became fair indeed, and fit to compare even with Elvan Tirion beyond the sea. High and white were its walls, and smooth its stairs, and tall and strong was the tower of the king. There shining fountains played, and in the courts of Turgon stood images of the trees of old, which Turgon himself wrought with elven craft. And the tree which he made of gold was named Glimgal, and the tree whose flowers he made of silver was named Belthil. But fairer than all the wonders of Gondolin was Idril, Turgon's daughter, she that was called Celebrindal, the Silverfoot, whose hair was as the gold of Laurelin before the coming of Melkor. Thus Turgon lived long in bliss, but Nevrast was desolate, and remained empty of living folk until the ruin of Beleriand. Now, while the city of Gondolin was building in secret, Finrod Felagund wrought in the deep places of Nargothrond. But Galadriel, his sister, dwelt, as has been told, in Thingol's realm in Doriath. And at times Melian and Galadriel would speak together of Valinor, and the bliss of old. But beyond the dark hour of the death of the trees, Galadriel would not go, but ever fell silent. And on a time Melian said, There is some woe that lies upon you and your kin. That I can see in you, but all else is hidden from me, for by no vision or thought can I perceive anything that passed or passes in the west. The shadow lies over all the land of Ammon, and reaches far out over the sea. Why will you not tell me more? For that woe is past, said Galadriel, and I would take what joy is here left untroubled by memory, and maybe there is woe enough yet to come, though still hope may seem bright. Then Melian looked in her eyes and said, I believe not that the Noldor came forth as messengers of the Valar, as was said at first, not though they came in the very hour of our need. For they speak never of the Valar, nor have their high lords brought any message to Thingol, whether from Manwë, or Ulmo, or even from Olwë, the king's brother. and his own folk that went over the sea. For what cause, Galadriel, were the high people of the Noldor driven forth as exiles from Aman? Or what evil lies on the sons of Feanor, that they are so haughty and so fell? Do I not strike near the truth? Near, said Galadriel, save that we were not driven forth, but came of our own will, and against that of the Valar. And through great peril, and in despite of the Valar, for this purpose we came, to take vengeance upon Morgoth, and regain what he stole. Then Galadriel spoke to Melian of the Silmarils, and of the slaying of King Finwë at Formanos. But still she said no word of the oath, nor of the kinslaying, nor of the burning of the ships at Losgar. But Melian said, Now much you tell me, and yet more I perceive. A darkness you would cast over the long road from Tirion, but I see evil there, which Thingol should learn for his guidance. Maybe, said Galadriel, but not of me. And Melian spoke then no more of these matters with Galadriel, but she told to King Thingol all that she had heard of the Silmarils. This is a great matter, she said, greater indeed than the Noldor themselves understand. For the light of Ammon and the fate of Arda lie locked now in these things, the work of Feanor, who is gone. They shall not be recovered, I foretell, by any power of the Eldar, and the world shall be broken in battles that are to come, ere they are wrested from Morgoth. See now, Feanor they have slain, and many another, as I guess. But first of all the deaths they have brought, and yet shall bring, was Finwë, your friend. Morgoth slew him ere he fled from Ammon. Then Thingol was silent, being filled with grief and foreboding. But at length he said, Now at last I understand the coming of the Noldor out of the west, at which I wondered much before. Not to our aid did they come, save by chance. For those that remain in Middle-earth, the Valar will leave to their own devices, until the uttermost need. For vengeance and redress of their loss, the Noldor came. Yet all the more sure shall they be as allies against Morgoth, with whom it is not now to be thought that they shall ever make treaty. But Melian said, Truly for these causes they came, but for others also. Beware of the sons of Feanor. The shadow of the wrath of the Valar lies upon them, and they have done evil, I perceive, both in Ammon and to their own kin. A grief but lulled to sleep lies between the princes of the Noldor. And Thingol answered, What is that to me? Of Feanor I have heard, but it was not long before whispered tales began to pass among the Sindar concerning the deeds of the Noldor, ere they came to Beleriand. Certain it is whence they came, and the evil truth was enhanced and poisoned by lies. But the Sindar were yet unwary and trustful of words, and, as may well be thought, Morgoth chose them for this first assault of his malice, for they knew him not. And Círdan, hearing these dark tales, was troubled, for he was wise, and perceived swiftly that true or false they were put about at this time through malice, though the malice he deemed was that of the princes of the Noldor, because of the jealousy of their houses. Therefore he sent messengers to Thingol to tell all that he had heard. It chanced that at the time the sons of Finarfin were again the guests of Thingol, for they wished to see their sister Galadriel. Then Thingol, being greatly moved, spoke in anger to Finrod, saying, Ill have you done to me, kinsman, to conceal so great matters from me. For now I have learned of all the evil deeds of the Noldor. But Finrod answered, What ill have I done you, lord? Or what evil deed have the Noldor done in all your realm to grieve you? Neither against your kingship nor against any of your people have they thought evil or done evil. I marvel at you, son of Eowyn, said Thingol, that you would come to the board of your kinsmen, thus red-handed from the slaying of your mother's kin, and yet say naught in defence, nor yet seek any pardon. Then Finrod was greatly troubled, but he was silent, for he could not defend himself save by bringing charges against the other princes of the Noldor, and that he was loath to do before Thingol. But in Angrod's heart, the memory of the words of Caranthir welled up again in bitterness, and he cried, Lord, I know not what lies you have heard, nor whence, but we came not red-handed. Guiltless we came forth, save maybe of folly, to listen to the words of fell Feanor, and become as if besotted with wine, and as briefly, no evil did we do on our road, but suffered ourselves great wrong, and forgave it. For this we are named tale-bearers to you, and treasonable to the Noldor, untruly, as you know. For we have of our loyalty been silent before you, and thus earned your anger. But now these charges are no longer to be borne, and the truth you shall know. Then Angrod spoke bitterly against the sons of Feanor, telling of the blood at Alqualonde, and the doom of Mandos, and the burning of the ships at Losgar, and he cried, Wherefore should we that endured the grinding ice bear the name of kinslayers and traitors? Yet the shadow of Mandos lies on you also, said Melian. But Thingol was long silent ere he spoke. Go now, he said, for my heart is hot within me. Later you may return if you will, for I will not shut my doors forever against you, my kindred, that were ensnared in an evil that you did not aid. With Fingolfin and his people also I will keep friendship, for they have bitterly atoned for such ill as they did, and in our hatred of the power that wrought all this woe, our griefs shall be lost. But hear my words. Never again in my ears shall be heard the tongue of those who slew my kin in Alqualonde, nor in all my realm shall it be openly spoken while my power endures, and all the Sindor shall hear my command that they shall neither speak with the tongue of the Noldor nor answer to it. And all such as use it shall be held slayers of kin, and betrayers of kin unrepentant. Then the sons of Finarfin departed from Menegroth with heavy hearts, perceiving how the words of Mandos would ever be made true, and that none of the Noldor that followed after Feanor could escape from the shadow that lay upon his house. And it came to pass even as Thingol had spoken, for the Sindar heard his word, and thereafter throughout Beleriand they refused the tongue of the Noldor, and shunned those that spoke it aloud. But the exiles took the Sindarin tongue in all their daily uses, and the high speech of the West was spoken only by the lords of the Noldor, among themselves. Yet that speech lived ever as a language of law, wherever any of that people dwelt. It came to pass that Nargothrond was full wrought, and yet Turgon still dwelt in the halls of Vinyamar, and the sons of Finarfin were gathered there to a feast, and Galadriel came from Doriath, and dwelt a while in Nargothrond. Now King Finrod Felagund had no wife, and Galadriel asked him why this should be. But foresight came upon Felagund as she spoke, and he said, An oath I too shall swear, and must be free to fulfill it, and go into darkness. Nor shall anything of my realm endure, that a son should inherit. But it is said that not until that hour had such cold thoughts ruled him. For indeed, she whom he had loved was Amaria of the Vanyar, and she went not with him into exile. Of Maeglin. Arathel Arphania, the White Lady of the Noldor, daughter of Fingolfin, dwelt in Nevrast with Torgon her brother, and she went with him to the hidden kingdom. But she wearied of the guarded city of Gondolin, desiring ever the longer, the more to ride again in the wide lands, and to walk in the forests, as had been her wont in Valinor. And when 200 years had passed since Gondolin was full wrought, she spoke to Torgon, and asked leave to depart. Torgon was loath to grant this, and long denied her. But at the last he yielded, saying, Go then if you will, though it is against my wisdom, and I forebode that ill will come of it, both to you and to me. But you shall go only to seek Fingon our brother, and those that I send with you shall return hither to Gondolin as swiftly as they may. But Arathel said, I am your sister, and not your servant, and beyond your bounds. I will go as seems good to me, and if you begrudge me an escort, then I will go alone. Then Turgon answered, I grudge you nothing that I have. Yet I desire that none shall dwell beyond my walls who know the way hither. And if I trust you, my sister, others I trust less to keep guard on their tongues. And Turgon appointed 3 lords of his household to ride with Arathel, and he bid them lead her to Fingon in Hithlum, if they might prevail upon her. And be wary, he said, for though Morgoth be yet hemmed in the north, there are many perils in Middle-earth of which the lady knows nothing. Then Arathel departed from Gondolin, and Turgon's heart was heavy at her going. But when she came to the ford of Brithiach in the river Sirion, she said to her companions, Turn now south and not north, for I will not ride to Hithlum. My heart desires rather to find the sons of Feanor, my friends of old. And since she could not be dissuaded, they turned south as she commanded, and sought admittance into Doriath. But the march wardens denied them, for Thingol would suffer none of the Noldor to pass the girdle, save his kinsfolk of the house of Finarfin, and least of all those that were friends of the sons of Feanor. Therefore the march wardens said to Arathel, To the land of Celegorm for which you seek, lady, you may by no means pass through the realm of King Thingol. You must ride beyond the girdle of Melian to the south or to the north. The speediest way is by the paths that lead east from the Brithiach, through Dimbar, and along the north march of this kingdom, until you pass the bridge of Esgalduin, and the fords of Aros, and come to the lands that lie behind the hill of Himring. There dwell, as we believe, Celegorm and Curufin, and it may be that you will find them, but the road is perilous. Then Arathel turned back and sought the dangerous road between the haunted valleys of Ered Gorgoroth and the north fences of Doriath. And as they drew near to the evil region of Nan Dun Gortheb, the riders became enmeshed in shadows, and Arathel strayed from her companions and was lost. They sought long for her in vain, fearing that she had been ensnared or had drunk from the poisoned streams of that land. But the fell creatures of Ungoliant that dwelt in the ravines were aroused and pursued them, and they hardly escaped with their lives. When at last they returned and their tale was told, there was great sorrow in Gondolin, and Turgon sat long alone, enduring grief and anger in silence. But Arathel, having sought in vain for her companions, rode on, for she was fearless and hardy of heart, as were all the children of Finwë. And she held on her way, and crossing Esgalduin and Aros, came to the land of Himlad, between Aros and Kelon, where Celegorm and Curufin dwelt in those days, before the breaking of the siege of Angband. At that time they were from home, riding with Caranthir east in Thargelion. But the people of Celegorm welcomed her, and bade her stay among them with honor until their lord's return. There for a while she was content, and had great joy in wandering free in the woodlands. But as the year lengthened and Celegorm did not return, she became restless again, and took to riding alone ever further abroad, seeking for new paths and untrodden glades. Thus it chanced in the waning of the year that Arathel came to the south of Himlad, and passed over Kelon, and before she was aware, she was enmeshed in Nan Elmoth. In that wood, in ages past, Melian walked in the twilight of Middle-earth, when the trees were young, and enchantment lay upon it still. But now the trees of Nan Elmoth were the tallest and darkest in all the Beleriand, and there the sun never came. And there Eol dwelt, who was named the Dark Elf. Of old he was the kin of Thingol, but he was restless and ill at ease in Doriath. And when the girdle of Melian was set about the forest of Region, where he dwelt, he fled thence to Nan Elmoth. There he lived in deep shadow, loving the night and the twilight under the stars. He shunned the Noldor, holding them to blame for the return of Morgoth, to trouble the quiet of Beleriand. But for the dwarves, he had more liking than any other of the elven folk of old. From him, the dwarves learned much of what passed in the lands of the Eldar. Now the traffic of the dwarves down from the Blue Mountains followed 2 roads across East Beleriand, and the northern way, going towards the fords of Aros, passed nigh to Nan Elmoth. And there Eol would meet the Naugrim and hold converse with them. And as their friendship grew, he would at times go and dwell as guest in the deep mansions of Nogrod, or Belagost. There he learned much of metalwork, and came to great skill therein. And he devised a metal as hard as the steel of the dwarves, but so malleable that he could make it thin and supple, and yet it remained resistant to all blades and darts. He named it Galvorn, for it was black and shining like jet, and he was clad in it whenever he went abroad. But Eol, though stooped by his smithwork, was no dwarf, but a tall elf of a high kin of the Teleri, noble, though grim of face, and his eyes could see deep into shadows and dark places. And it came to pass that he saw Arathel Arthaniel, as she strayed among the tall trees near the borders of Nan Elmoth, a gleam of white in the dim land. Very fair she seemed to him, and he desired her. And he set his enchantments about her, so that she could not find the ways out, but drew ever nearer to his dwelling in the depths of the wood. There were his smithy, and his dim halls, and such servants as he had, silent and secret as their master. And when Arathel, weary with wandering, came at last to his doors, he revealed himself, and he welcomed her, and led her into his house. And there she remained. For Eol took her to wife, and it was long ere any of her kin heard of her again. It is not said that Arathel was wholly unwilling, nor that her life in Nan Elmoth was hateful to her for many years. For though at Eol's command she must shun the sunlight, they wandered far together under the stars, or by the light of the sickle moon, or she might fare alone as she would, save that Eol forbade her to seek the sons of Feanor, or any others of the Noldor. And Arathel bore to Eol a son in the shadows of Nan Elmoth, and in her heart she gave him a name in the forbidden tongue of the Noldor, Lomian, that signifies child of the twilight. But his father gave him no name until he was 12 years old. Then he called him Maeglin, which is sharp glance, for he perceived that the eyes of his son were more piercing than his own, and his thought could read the secrets of hearts beyond the mist of words. As Maeglin grew to full stature, he resembled in face and form rather his kindred of the Noldor, but in mood and mind he was the son of his father. His words were few, save in matters that touched him near, and then his voice had a power to move those that heard him, and to overthrow those that withstood him. He was tall and black-haired. His eyes were dark yet bright and keen as the eyes of the Noldor, and his skin was white. Often he went with Eol to the cities of the dwarves in the east of Ered Lindon, and there he learned eagerly what they would teach, and above all, the craft of finding the ores of metals in the mountains. Yet it is said that Maeglin loved his mother better, and if Eol were abroad, he would sit long beside her and listen to all that she could tell him of her kin and their deeds in Eldamar, and of the might and valor of the princes of the house of Fingolfin. All these things he laid to heart, but most of all that which he heard of Turgon, and that he had no heir. For Elenwe, his wife, perished in the crossing of the Helcaraxa, and his daughter Idril Celebrindel was his only child. In the telling of these tales there was awakened in Arathel a desire to see her own kin again, and she marveled that she had grown weary of the light of Gondolin, and the fountains in the sun, and the green sward of Tumladen under the windy skies of spring. Moreover, she was often alone in the shadows when both her son and her husband were away. Of these tales also grew the first quarrels of Maeglin and Eol, for by no means would his mother reveal to Maeglin where Turgon dwelt, nor by what means one might come thither, and he bided his time, trusting yet to wheedle the secret from her, or perhaps to read her unguarded mind. But ere that could be done, he desired to look on the Noldor, and speak with the sons of Feanor, his kin, that dwelt not far away. But when he declared his purpose to Eol, his father was wrathful. "You are of the house of Eol, Maeglin, my son," he said, "and not of the Golothrim. All this land is the land of the Teleri, and I will not deal, nor have my son deal with the slayers of our kin, the invaders and usurpers of our homes. In this you shall obey me, or I will set you in bonds." And Maeglin did not answer, but was cold and silent, and went abroad no more with Eol, and Eol mistrusted him. It came to pass that at the midsummer the dwarves, as was their custom, bade Eol to a feast in Nogrod, and he rode away. Now Maeglin and his mother were free for a while to go where they wished, and they rode often to the eaves of the wood, seeking the sunlight. And desire grew hot in Maeglin's heart to leave Nan Elmoth forever. Therefore he said to Arathel, "Lady, let us depart while there is time. What hope is there in this wood for you or for me? Here we are held in bondage, and no profit shall I find here. For I have learned all that my father has to teach, or that the Naugrim will reveal to me. Shall we not seek for Gondolin? You shall be my guide, and I will be your guard." Then Arathel was glad, and looked with pride upon her son. And telling the servants of Eol that they went to seek the sons of Feanor, they departed and rode away to the north eaves of Nan Elmoth. There they crossed the slender stream of Kelon into the land of Himlad, and rode on to the fords of Aros, and so westward along the fences of Doriath. Now Eol returned out of the east sooner than Maeglin had foreseen, and found his wife and his son but 2 days gone. And so great was his anger that he followed after them even by the light of day. As he entered the Himlad, he mastered his wrath and went warily, remembering his danger. For Celegorm and Curufin were mighty lords who loved Eol not at all. And Curufin, moreover, was of perilous mood. But the scouts of Aglon had marked the riding of Maeglin and Arathel to the fords of Aros. And Curufin, perceiving that strange deeds were afoot, came south from the pass and encamped near the fords. And before Eol had ridden far across the Himlad, he was waylaid by the riders of Curufin and taken to their lord. Then Curufin said to Eol, "What errand have you, dark elf, in my lands? An urgent matter, perhaps, that keeps one so sun-shy abroad by day." And Eol, knowing his peril, restrained the bitter words that arose in his mind. "I have learned, Lord Curufin," he said, "that my son and my wife, the White Lady of Gondolin, have ridden to visit you while I was from home, and it seemed to me fitting that I should join them on this errand." Then Curufin laughed at Eol, and he said, "They might have found their welcome here less warm than they had hoped had you accompanied them. But it is no matter, for that was not their errand. It is not 2 days since they passed over the Arosiach, and thence rode swiftly westward. It seems that you would deceive me, unless indeed you yourself have been deceived." And Eol answered, "Then, Lord, perhaps you will give me leave to go and discover the truth of this matter." "You have my leave, but not my love," said Curufin. "The sooner you depart from my land, the better will it please me." Then Eol mounted his horse, saying, "It is good, Lord Curufin, to find a kinsman thus kindly at need. I will remember it when I return." Then Curufin looked darkly upon Eol. "Do not flaunt the title of your wife before me," he said. "For those who steal the daughters of the Noldor, and wed them without gift or leave, do not gain kinship with their kin. I have given you leave to go. Take it and be gone. By the laws of the Eldar I may not slay you at this time, and this counsel I add. Return now to your dwelling in the darkness of Nan Elmoth, for my heart warns me that if you now pursue those who love you no more, never will you return thither." Then Eol rode off in haste, and he was filled with hatred of all the Noldor, for he perceived now that Maeglin and Arathel were fleeing to Gondolin. And driven by anger and the shame of his humiliation, he crossed the fords of Aros and rode hard upon the way that they had gone before. And though they knew not that he followed them, and he had the swiftest steed, he came never in sight of them until they reached the Brithiach and abandoned their horses. Then, by ill fate, they were betrayed, for the horses neighed loudly, and Eol's steed heard them and sped towards them. And Eol saw from afar the white raiment of Arathel, and marked which way she went, seeking the secret path into the mountains. Now Arathel and Maeglin came to the outer gate of Gondolin, and the dark guard under the mountains. And there she was received with joy, and passing through the 7 gates, she came with Maeglin to Turgan, upon Amon Gwaireth. Then the king listened with wonder to all that Arathel had to tell, and he looked with liking upon Maeglin, his sister son, seeing in him one worthy to be accounted among the princes of the Noldor. I rejoice indeed that Arthaniel has returned to Gondolin, he said. And now more fair again shall my city seem than in the days when I deemed her lost, and Maeglin shall have the highest honor in my realm. Then Maeglin bowed low, and took Turgon for lord and king to do all his will. But thereafter he stood silent and watchful, for the bliss and splendor of Gondolin surpassed all that he had imagined from the tales of his mother, and he was amazed by the strength of the city, and the hosts of its people, and the many things strange and beautiful that he beheld. Yet to none were his eyes more often drawn than to Idril, the king's daughter, who sat beside him. For she was golden as the Vanya, her mother's kindred, and she seemed to him as the sun from which all the king's hall drew its light. But Eol, following after Arathel, found the dry river and the secret path, and so creeping in by stealth, he came to the guard, and was taken and questioned. And when the guard heard that he claimed Arathel as wife, they were amazed, and sent a swift messenger to the city, and he came to the king's hall. Lord, he cried, the guard have taken captive one that came by stealth to the dark gate. Eol, he names himself, and he is a tall elf, dark and grim, of the kindred of the Sindar. Yet he claims the lady Arathel as his wife, and demands to be brought before you. His wrath is great, and he is hard to restrain, but we have not slain him as your law commands. Then Arathel said, Alas, Eol has followed us even as I feared, but with great stealth was it done, for we saw and heard no pursuit as we entered upon the hidden way. And then she said to the messenger, He speaks not the truth. He is Eol, and I am his wife, and he is the father of my son. Slay him not, but lead him hither to the king's judgment, if the king so wills. And so it was done. And Eol was brought into Turgon's hall, and stood before his high seat, proud and sullen. Though he was amazed no less than his son at all that he saw, his heart was filled the more with anger and with hate of the Noldor. But Turgon treated him with honor, and rose up and would take his hand. And he said, Welcome, kinsman, for so I hold you. Here you shall dwell at your pleasure, save only that you must here abide and depart not from my kingdom. For it is my law that none who finds the way hither